This is the new 2024 Ferrari Purosangue, and it's sacrilege for Ferrari purists. A Ferrari SUV with 4 doors, but all the other luxury and performance brands did it, so it's no surprise that Ferrari has finally followed suit. Today, I'm going to review the new Purosangue and show you all the quirks and features of Ferrari's first SUV. Today's video is brought to you by Cars and Bids, my online enthusiast car auction site that recently sold this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Check it out at carsandbids.com. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Purosangue, Ferrari's SUV. Although they don't call it that. Ferrari insists this is an FUV for Ferrari Utility Vehicle. That's what they call it, but of course we will call it an SUV. Now, speaking of the name, Purosangue, it means pure blood in Italian, and technically it's named after a horse breed, the Purosangue horse breed, which ties in with Ferrari's horse logo. But obviously the real intent of the name is clear. Ferrari wants you to think this is a pure-blooded Ferrari descended from the pure Ferrari bloodline, even though it's an SUV. Now, there will be many who doubt the pure-blooded Ferrari-ness of this vehicle, given that it's such a radical departure from everything we know about Ferrari, and that's reasonable. But to Ferrari's credit, they've given it a very Ferrari engine. This has a naturally aspirated 6.5-liter V12 with 715 horsepower and 530 pound-feet of torque. It's mated to a dual-clutch automatic transmission and standard all-wheel drive, and the result is 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds with a top speed of 193 miles an hour. Amazing figures for an SUV, or an FUV. Now, one other Ferrari tradition the Purosangue upholds is it's very expensive. Starting price around $400,000. Big money when you consider a Lamborghini Urus base price is around $275,000. Other important notes, the Purosangue rides on the Ferrari Roma platform, and a hybrid-powered V8 is coming in addition to the V12, although I gotta say, launching with this big old NA V12 certainly gives credibility to the first Ferrari SUV. As for interesting quirks up here, you can probably see the biggest. The hood is front hinged. You pull the hood latch in the driver footwell and it pops open from the front, adding a little bit of pizzazz when you open the engine bay. But anyway, next up we move on to the other big thing about the Purosangue. It has 4 doors, 2 in the front, 2 in the back, like so many normal cars, but unlike every other Ferrari. This isn't just Ferrari's first SUV, it's their first ever 4-door car. Aside from a few one-off models here and there, this is the first 4-door Ferrari. And the rear doors, predictably, are very weird. This is the door latch on the outside. It's located here, strangely enough, and when you pull on it, it electronically pops the door open an inch or 2, as you can see, and then you manually open it the rest of the way, and it's rear hinged, so it opens the opposite direction from a standard rear door in a vehicle. This door is also unusually small, and it's almost like Ferrari didn't want to fully commit to a real 4-door car, so they gave us most of back doors. Now, the really weird part with the rear door comes if you want to close it. You walk up to that handle where you opened it, you push on it, and then it automatically closes completely on its own. You don't have to do anything. And as you might imagine, you climb inside, and the rear seat of the world's first 4-door Ferrari is very interesting and quirky, so let's get to it. First off, you sit down, and to close the door, you press this button on the B-pillar next to the front seat back, and the door automatically closes itself. You don't do anything. To open the door again, there's a button on the door itself. You push that, it electronically pops open, and again, you push it open the rest of the way and climb out. But onto the back seats themselves. Back here, it's somewhat tight, but definitely tolerable, and if you're looking for more space in the back of the Purosangue, well, the rear seats are power adjustable. You have full adjustment here on the side, just like like you would have up front, so you can move the seat back for more legroom or down for more headroom or recline it if that's what you want to do. Very luxurious touch in back. You will also notice immediately the seats back here are two individual, well, they look like sport seats almost, like you'd find in the front of a performance car. Here they're in back, and you only get two. Ferrari is not offering this vehicle with 3 across rear seating, so the max seating capacity of the Purosangue is 4 seats, 2 front and 2 rear. But the most interesting part in the back of the Purosangue is undoubtedly the controls, which are absolutely bizarre. They're here in the fixed center console, and you have a little circle that's a touch screen, which adjusts most of the controls back here. For instance, you can tap this and it will change the tint level on the giant glass panel over the car. If you want it darker to keep out the sun, or if you want it lighter to enjoy the sky above you, press that and it instantly changes with your every push. But you also use this circle touchscreen for the climate controls and the heated and cooled seats back here, and the operation is wild. You want to go into the heated seats. Well, you tap the seat icon, and then you have to tap again to select which seat you're adjusting, because you're adjusting it from the middle, so the car doesn't know if you're left seat or right seat. Once you've selected your seat, you press the eject button at the top of the circle, and it rises up automatically out of the center console to become a dial. From there, you switch the dial left or right, depending on heated or cooled seat, to turn on your seat. And if you want to do the other side, just select the other seat and follow the very same procedure. It's similar for climate controls. You can go into climate control here, but you can't actually adjust the temperature until you press the eject button. The whole circle rises up, and then it becomes a dial that lets you change your rear climate temperature. A very unusual control situation, but that's what they've done. Now, aside from the all-powerful circle in the center, your other controls back here are fairly straightforward. Your power windows are here in the center console, as you can see, just fairly standard window switches. And in back, you also have cup holders. You press on this leather panel that says push, it softly opens up to reveal rear seat cup holders, another nice convenience back here. Also, if you lift up the center console armrest lid, you will discover a couple of power ports in here, and also a wireless phone charger, which is nice to have, especially in back. You don't always see it. You also have rear climate vents, as you can see, right here in the middle at the back of the front center console, and that's basically your rear seat experience in the Purosangue. And next, we move up front in the Purosangue, which is also absolutely packed with crazy quirks and features, starting with, well, just getting in. This is the key fob. It's this rectangular piece that's absolutely beautiful, although not very practical. You don't even get a hoop to stick it on your key ring. But you do get a big Ferrari horse logo on one side, and when you flip it over, the other side is leather with stitching around the edge. And instead of buttons, it just has sort of pads where you press. Very classy affair, and it says Purosangue on the bottom. It's all pretty cool. Now, opening up the front door is a lot more traditional than getting into the back. You have a handle right here. You stick your fingers here into this panel and then pull. It electronically pops open, and you just open it the rest of the way. It's normally hinged, a traditional door. Once you're inside, if you want to get out, there's no regular door handle. Again, it's electronic. You press this button, it pops open, and you push it open the rest of the way. But once you climb inside, you're greeted by a crazy array of screens and unusual controls, many of which are hidden until you start the car or start actually adjusting things. Let me show you. The first thing you press is engine start stop, which is a little screen button here in the center of the steering wheel, not an actual button. But you push that, and then the car roars to life, and some new controls appear, including this switch, and the drive mode suddenly lights up so you can adjust your drive modes. Now, there are still a lot of dark buttons at this point that are not available to you until you start pressing stuff. For instance, the cruise control is all over here on the left, but none of these buttons have turned on yet. You don't turn them on until you press the right side of the steering wheel, the center of this arrow pad. Then that tells the car you're adjusting things on the wheel, and it turns on your cruise control functions so you can make adjustments and operate cruise control. control very unorthodox. In fact, this steering wheel in general is very unorthodox. In addition to cruise control and the starter screen button, it also contains your windshield wipers. As you can see over on this side, you can set it to A for auto or manually operate them. On the left, you have your headlight control, as you can see, and the little bright indicator is you can flash your high beams. And it even has your turn signals, which operate pretty well. You push them down, a quick tap for a 3-second flash, or you push down to a second click to turn them on permanently until obviously you make your turn and they turn off automatically like every other car. And another interesting item on the steering wheel is a shift light, which is mounted along the top edge of the wheel in an arc, almost like a tachometer, and it gets red as you get close to red line, which is a very cool way to visualize that you need to upshift, and much more direct and engaging than a tachometer and a gauge cluster. On the subject of hidden buttons, another button screen situation that's hidden until you start the car is the climate controls, which are in the center. You can see this panel is black, but then you turn it on and they all light up to greet you. And once again, you're looking at a circle touchscreen, just like what you found in back. And the operation is similar, except in back it's a novelty, and up front it's just kind of annoying. You want to turn on your heated seat, for example. It is a many-step process. You press the seat icon, then the circle screen lets you choose which seat you want to turn on, because again, it's in the center and it doesn't know where you're controlling it from. So you select the seat you want, then once again you press eject to pop the circle out of its spot, rises up, and then you twist it for heated or cooled seat. And you got to do that every time you want to put the heated or cooled seat on. It's not exactly the easiest operation, even though it is pretty cool. Now, other items worth noting in this center control panel area, beyond just the climate controls, you have the sunroof adjustment here. So just like in back, you can change whether it's dark tinted to keep out the sun or lighter to let more of the air into the car. You also have an axle lifter here, which is surprising. This is, after all, an SUV with a lot more ground clearance than a traditional Ferrari, but if you're scraping somewhere, you can press that and lift up the front end for more clearance, just like you would in a Ferrari sports car. The real surprise in this interior, though, is the fact that there is no center screen in the middle of the dashboard, like there is in practically every other car in existence. Well, the Purosangue is a different kind of Ferrari, and it has a different kind of technology. Instead, you get two screens, one for the driver and one for the passenger, controlled separately in their own worlds on both sides of the dash. Now, the driver screen is fairly familiar from other Ferrari models I've reviewed, although in this car its functionality has actually been toned down a bit. It relies heavily on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto for a lot of stuff, including navigation, music, etc. You can adjust your settings in here with this arrow pad on the steering wheel, but otherwise you navigate over to CarPlay and Android Auto, you get your phone hooked up, and you can pretty much go from there, and that is your basic driver screen. The passenger screen is a little more unusual and unorthodox. For one thing, its location means heavy glare. In direct sunlight, it's hard to even read what's on the passenger screen. But you get past that, and actually there's a lot of stuff you can do here. Turn on your heated and cooled seat on this screen instead of going into that confusing center climate situation. You can adjust the climate controls in here too. Change the temperature, all the usual stuff you do with climate controls. You can control the music from the passenger screen as well, and you even have a display that shows vehicle information, like the gear that you're currently in and the speed that you're currently traveling, so you can monitor the driver's performance from the passenger seat while you're simultaneously turning on your ventilated seat and changing the music. And there's other interesting stuff up front worth pointing out. For one thing, the cup holders are under this panel. You just tap it and it pops open. That's pretty standard in most vehicles, but surprising in a Ferrari. Not too many Ferrari models have cup holders, but this one, if it's going to be an SUV that's going to get more normal traditional use, it's got to have traditional comforts like cup holders and a wireless charging pad up front for your devices, and you pop pop open the center console armrest lid and you can see a couple of power ports in here and a cigarette lighter outlet power port as well for charging all of your devices. All the usual comforts of an SUV, now in a Ferrari. And there's more to talk about up here. For instance, your window switches. You can see front and rear switches on both sides, along with a button for child locks for the rear doors. Another unusual item to find in a Ferrari, but here it is. You also have your gear selector situation, although it doesn't actually select the gear. You get in this car and turn it on, you put it in drive or first by pulling the right paddle. But you control the rest of your transmission functions here. You can go into reverse, as you can see, switch between automatic or manual mode, and PS stands for Power Start, which is Ferrari's name for launch control. Two cool things about this transmission switchy area. For one, the look is intended to mimic the old school gated manual shifter look of vintage Ferrari models. So you have a retro looking transmission control, which is kind of cool. I also love the lights that light up when you actually adjust any of these switches. It sort of lights its pathway to reverse or to automatic or manual. It's almost like a little shooting star in your gear selector switch. And next we move on to the back, where you will find, despite the many interesting quirks and weird touches in this car, a surprisingly normal and practical cargo area. So opening up the tailgate, you can do it in three ways. There's a button above the license plate where you push it and it pops open automatically. You can also open it on the driver's door panel. This button here, you press it, or on the key fob, you press the unlock button twice and then your tailgate opens up. And it reveals a cargo area. It's not huge, but it's reasonably sized. You have decent space for stuff back here where you can store things, and it's a lot more practical than basically any other Ferrari, which is nice. Now, when you look in here, you can see a plaque on the back end of the cargo area showing all of the options that this car has. Ferrari includes this plaque on all of its vehicles. In the mid-engine cars, it's found in the front trunk, but here, the trunk's in the back, and so is the plaque. But the interesting thing is that the carpeted partition that the plaque is sitting on, which separates the cargo area from the interior, that's removable. So you can take out the cargo cover, as you can see, then you can remove the partition. There's little latches on the sides, you just pull it out, and then the cargo area is open to the interior. And check this out, you can use these buttons over on the side of the cargo area to automatically drop the rear seats. They power fold down and back up again when you want, but when they're down, you now have a huge cargo area, essentially all of the space behind the front seats where you can put stuff. It's an amazing amount of practicality and utility from a Ferrari SUV, the FUV. Now, there's also even more cargo space. If you lift up the floor of the cargo area, you can lift it up and see there's some extra space under here for even more stuff. It's a surprisingly practical effort from Ferrari in a first attempt at an SUV. By the way, one other thing I absolutely love, this car comes with a bunch of goodies, but it's mostly stuff you'd expect, a cargo cover, a battery trickle charger, a front license plate mount, but it also comes with this. A little packet with the Ferrari horse on it, and it's magnetized at the top to keep it from opening up. When you do open up the packet, you see there's a bunch of different smaller packages that contain cleaners. You have upholstery cleaner, antibacterial hand gel, plastic cleaner, glass cleaner, and leather cleaner, all Ferrari branded with the Ferrari horse logo on it. Which separates them, of course, from your normal, regular antibacterial hand gel, because this is Ferrari stuff. And finally, we move on to the outside of the Purosangue, where we find a few other interesting exterior quirks, starting with, in back, the quad exhausts, which make the V12 sound absolutely fantastic. Take a listen to a few revs. Up front, you also have this aerodynamic pass-through on the hood where air sort of goes through this channel, and there's an opening on the hood to allow it to pass through, which I presume enhances the downforce of this car. It's certainly an interesting design, especially to see on an SUV. And speaking of design, let's talk about the overall exterior design of the Purosangue, which I have to say is okay. I like a lot of things about this car. The engine, a lot of the tech, some cool design touches, but I'm really not in love with the styling. To my eyes, there's two problems. Number one, it's very flowy and curvy, where a lot of other automakers are going more angular and boxy. It certainly bucks the modern design trend, and I'm not sure I like the flowing kind of bulbous curves on the outside of this car. It's also not helped by the very, very long hood line, which looks a little strange paired with a four-door hatchback body. But I think the real problem there is Ferrari has tried to scale up the design of its sports car and turn it into an SUV. And taking your most popular car and making it an SUV has been a recipe for not particularly great-looking SUVs for Lamborghini, Bentley, and Rolls-Royce. And it was Porsche's problem with the original Cayenne as well. Trying to take the sports car design and match it to an SUV, it just doesn't work. Fortunately, Porsche figured out for the next generation Cayenne how to make it beautiful, which is give it its own design language. But all the other automakers tried to scale up their car, and it didn't work well. And I think this is a good example of that. It looks fine. It certainly looks distinctive and special, but it's not as beautiful as I was hoping. But the most important part about this car is undoubtedly the way that it drives. Ferrari's first SUV. Does it drive like a Ferrari or an SUV? Let's find out. All right, driving the Purosangue, the new Ferrari SUV. This is a big deal. I've been waiting to drive this car for quite a long time. It was released in Europe a while ago, very delayed to come to the US. But it is now finally here, and I am now finally driving it. My favorite Purosangue story, a little bit of a morbid story, but I'll tell it. It's Sergio Marchionne, who I deeply respect. He was the CEO of the whole Fiat Chrysler group, and as such, he was the CEO of Ferrari as well. And about 5 years ago, he was interviewed, and they asked him, will Ferrari build an SUV? And he said, a Ferrari SUV over my dead body. That was a direct quote. And then a couple years later, he died. And now we have a Ferrari SUV. It's sad that he died. He was a brilliant man, but it's funny that it actually worked out that way. So the Purosangue and its big V12. Like I said, a V8 hybrid version is coming, but Ferrari led with the V12 probably to add credibility, and boy did they. A naturally aspirated V12 SUV, that's pretty damn cool. And no surprise, this thing drives pretty damn well. The V12, which of course I've driven before in the 812 Superfast, where you also can find it, is an immense powertrain with an enormous amount of power and performance. Tons of torque, tons of power at basically any part of the rev range. I mean, it's really quite an impressive engine. Oh, yeah. Woo-hoo. It motors this car. Oh. And this engine is just instantly responsive at any RPM. And has an amazing amount of torque, even with a quarter throttle or a half throttle. I've driven a lot of very special cars in the last 2 days, the new Porsche 718 Spyder RS, and the new AMG GT, but nothing quite responds like this V12 to throttle inputs. It's just so precise and so immediate, and it is absolutely fantastic. But we already knew the powertrain was good because we've driven it before. The big question is, how's the vehicle? How does the vehicle drive? And I gotta say, it is a pretty impressive thing. I'm not surprised by it. We were kind of told this would be the case. Ferrari making an SUV, they're not going to screw it up. But as much as I love the Lamborghini Urus, I mean, I'm cruising around in this, and I'm just astonished at how quickly it changes directions. Oh, and how forcefully you can just get it to go and really push on it, and it just instantly changes directions. It is tremendously confident. The steering precision is definitely not what you get in a supercar and like a true Ferrari performance car like a 296, but you weren't really expecting that from the SUV. It gets as close, I think, as an SUV possibly can. It's really impressive to me just how quickly it changes directions and just how quickly it can turn, and more importantly, how flat it feels in the corners and how incredibly confident it feels when you're pushing the accelerator and going hard around a corner. Really does not seem like a sport utility vehicle, which is why, of course, it is not a sport utility vehicle. It is a Ferrari utility vehicle. Oh, just endless confidence and grip. It's been a while since I've driven an Urus. Is this better than an Urus? It definitely feels faster. It has a much more engaging and thrilling and exciting powertrain that I really love. And man, it changes directions quickly. My recollection is that the Urus is also very good at that, but this car is just so athletic and agile in a way that you just are not expecting from an SUV. It's really tight, and just really supremely confident. This is a super SUV with a super SUV price tag, but boy, it is quite an amazing drive. It's also worth pointing out that it's a pretty reasonable car in terms of comfort and like quality of like the experience and the ride. Sitting in here, I feel like I could totally daily drive this car. It's a nice and comfortable and practical car. There's good room in here. There's good visibility. I mean, none of the concessions that you typically associate with a Ferrari and a Ferrari sports car and supercar, you really have to deal with in this. It really does all the SUV things that you would expect it to. And frankly, I don't think on the outside that it looks incredibly practical. You look at this and you don't think, wow, this really is, you know, a very capably practical SUV for soccer practice runs, but actually I think it could totally do that. And I suspect it will. Based on how I see Uruses getting used, I suspect this will end up being used about the same way for relatively, you know, normal street driving and running errands and that sort of thing. This is a very practical, usable car. It just costs an enormous amount of money, and it's, you know, it's kind of flashy. The Ferrari SUV, I'm driving around, people are definitely looking, people are definitely noticing, even in this muted color, which not everybody is looking for. But an impressive car, a very impressive overall car with a lot to like, and it does a lot of stuff very well. And so that's the new 2024 Ferrari Purosangue, Ferrari's take on an SUV. I don't love how it looks or what it costs, but I love how it drives. It really is a Ferrari SUV with a ferocious V12 under the hood, and it has an impressive interior and technology as well. Still, this is Ferrari entering a brave new world. Not entirely unexpected, but totally different nonetheless. And now it's time to give the Purosangue a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 71 out of 100, which puts the Purosangue here against other high-performance luxury SUV rivals. This is a really impressive vehicle with truly amazing performance, acceleration, handling, steering. I gave it a 7 for handling, and it's the very first SUV ever to get that score, but it deserves it. The Purosangue's drawbacks are a somewhat harsh ride, comfortable for a Ferrari, for a performance car, but harsh for an SUV, coupled with some confusing controls, slightly limited practicality with 4 seats, and most notably, its high price tag. Overall, though, this is an excellent effort, and it feels a lot more special and more impressive than the Lamborghini Urus, which really does feel like Lamborghini's flavor of an Audi or a Porsche, because that's what it is. The Purosangue is all Ferrari, and it shows.